sellers?
So actually, if you are good at this sales and marketing stuff, and you've sort of got your head up above water a little bit, one thing that you should probably think about is leveling up the industrial space that you're in and creating marketplaces actually. And this is, it'll be intuitively hard to do this because what marketplaces essentially do is replace salesmen with marketplaces. And so it's a little bit like, you're the fastest man in the world. What makes the marketplace valuable is that once it's in operation, not participating in the market is economically suicidal. Because the market can do better price negotiation than an average player, or in many cases, even the best player can do on their own in securing counterparties to actually trade with.
Welcome to the Ecom X Factor podcast, where it's all about launching and scaling your business using sales funnels, automations, and smart marketing. And now, please welcome your host, the founder of Ecom X Factor, Yaron Bin.
Hi, Noah. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Awesome. I'm very excited to conduct this conversation because lately I've been shifting the focus kind of away from technical stuff related to e-commerce. And our goal for today is speaking about more theory-related stuff, game theory, how markets work. So I'm looking forward towards the conversation. Before we get started, can you elaborate about your background story? I know you have a fascinating story, so do you mind sharing for the audience that might not know you?
Yeah, sure. So I do math for fun. That's also my job. The kind of math I'm interested in is the mathematics of computation, which is both the sort of math that you use to create the languages that you program computers with, but is also the sort of math you use to analyze systems to determine how they operate at scale. And so that is something that turns out to be when thinking about things like marketplaces, which are just optimizing algorithms that we use to sort of manage our economies for us, because people aren't really smart enough to manage our own economies, because we ourselves are as smart as we are, and part of the deal is that we need the entire system to be operating at a higher level than that.
Yeah. So with regards to this, one of the things that we spoke before starting is that your observation that the e-commerce space is operating as if we're in the Bronze Age. And correct me if I'm not labeling this exactly like you mentioned it, but this kind of way. So can you expand about this observation of yours? And then
Sure. So in sort of ancient days, communication and transportation were both extraordinarily expensive. And so the trick for commerce was that there was a great deal of speculation by the merchants, and they would have a lot of markup because they weren't really sure, who would want what. But the entire process of buying was essentially purely retail based, because if you wanted cabbages and the cart was full of onions, you couldn't buy any cabbages because there weren't any. And so things were very product based, very sort of company based. Of course, at that point, it would have been individuals or maybe families of merchants that would be the companies that were being used. And the core skills of the merchant were going to be, a certain amount of speculative acumen and cunning and sort of figuring out what to get on the carts. But a lot of it would be the technical problems of how to get stuff onto a transport how to get that transport to where it's going.
Mhm.
And with e-commerce, we're sort of going through all this stuff in fast forward, where it's not necessarily, FedEx and UPS in this country and, DHL around the world. You don't have to reinvent the wheel on barges and things like that, but still figuring out how to hook up a web page to an ordering system, to warehouses, to distribution. There's a lot of technical problems involved in that. And so we've seen the productization around, again, sort of company focused, market and sales driven retail. And the sort of the big daddy of that space, Amazon, isn't really a marketplace. It's a bazaar. It's like a central
Mhm.
location for people like that to simplify their technical problems so that they can try to level up their sales and marketing in order to gain customers. And the reason we largely abandoned that system about 1,000 years ago is that it's really expensive to compete in the marketing space with other expert marketers,
Mhm.
because there's more of them than there are of you.
Uh-huh.
So and you can't copyright any of this stuff. So if you get good at stuff, the people that also want to be in that space can look at what you're doing and repeat it.
Mhm.
And then each business is basically replicating the sales and marketing costs. And what I've seen sort of coming to dominate, talking to a lot of sales and marketing people, is that they switch off from sort of that kind of global reach type thing and try to get into relationships, which
Mhm.
is, yes, a business necessity, but also an economic disaster. Because if your economy is based on the pre-existing personal relationships, then if somebody goes on vacation or gets sick or retires or dies, then critical parts of your economic
Mhm.
web vanish with them. So it's just this process where we've basically invented an entirely new technology, and then over the course of about one generation completely replicated one of the most primitive kinds of economies that's ever existed.
Mhm. This is very interesting. Do you mind just clarifying? You said it's a bazaar, and I agree. And you said it's not a marketplace. So, what is the definition of marketplace in this case?
Well, yeah, so marketplace has had an evolving meaning over time, and of
Mhm.
course a bazaar of its time, that was what the marketplace was.
Uh-huh.
The What I would say, a marketplace is a centralization of commerce to increase efficiency.
Mhm.
And so a bazaar or a market town or things like that did that, because instead of having the cart salesman going door to door, they would all show up on one particular day and people could come together and you could see what was going on. But for the last 800-ish years, marketplaces have come to mean the sort of very well regulated kinds of systems that we use today, where people have very specific roles. You're buying and selling a known quality and quantity of stuff. There's known delivery times and so on. And so what you're getting is a much cleaner stream of economic information about what you should be producing, what's available to consume, and how much it's actually going to cost to operate businesses. And even in sort of a place focused on direct to consumer,
Mhm.
what we're seeing globally is a transformation of economic circumstance, and the sort of the person that's making enough money in their job to basically just have shopping as a luxury item it's not going away, but it's fundamentally changing in character. And so kind of business to business type transaction should be dominating your thinking, because if what you're offering to people isn't increasing their wealth, then in all probability that customer base is going to be getting poorer and is going to be sort of competing itself out of your potential market space. And that means that a lot of existing business models of I'll throw together some trash and make it glitzy, and then somebody will buy it for their kid's birthday. We're not gonna see that kind of thing keep happening, because the generation that did that, they're all retiring now. So we need something better.
Yeah, and I know that you have an alternative. So can you elaborate about what is the alternative that you're proposing?
Right. So I've discovered a strategic slice of game theory that I call negotiation games. So you'd mentioned game theory earlier. Game theory is the mathematics of strategy. And there's sort of two ways that you can use game theory. One, you can take a look at the situation that you actually confront and try to build a game theoretic model out of that situation, and then use the tools to apply to that circumstance and try to figure out what makes sense for you as a way to proceed. The other one is to model generic situations as almost a wisdom learning tool to build up a new repertoire of possible strategies for the future. And in that vein, there are a pretty large number of story-based, parables, if you will, that come out of the mathematics that describe different kinds of situations that aren't, they're both universal and abstract, right? So you're going to encounter a lot of these types of situations, but hopefully you'll never encounter these exact situations. So what the negotiation game does is it takes one kind of strategic condition, that is coordination games, the condition where agreeing is better for the participants than attempting to disagree with the group, which sometimes that's true. The example I generally use is, what side of the street do you drive on? Deciding to disagree with the group is going to work out very poorly for you. And if you're in conditions where agreeing is more valuable than disagreeing, there can still be a room where you would prefer everybody to agree with the way you'd like it to be instead of some other way. So under those conditions, there's a way to develop a computer program that will serve as a completely fair arbiter of what everybody should agree to. And you can basically create a brand new kind of condition, which is that strategic situation plus this computer program. And that is a negotiation game. And so for a marketplace, the sort of critical piece of information is what price and what time. And so what the core of my coordinated discovery market negotiation game is a calendar of prices. And what the computer program does is it essentially curates that calendar. So it publishes its state of, right now, this is what it looks like prices for the thing that I'm, figuring out look like. But it also takes on board new information and integrates that into the model. And so if somebody says, oh, yeah, inflation's getting out of control, prices are going up, and somebody else says, oh, yeah, I just made a new discovery in a lab and nobody actually needs this product for anything anymore, prices are going down. Those two opinions, along with opinions from anybody else in the system, can come in and integrate. And so the entire system can essentially negotiate with itself to find the prices that are optimally valuable across the entire market of buyers and sellers.
Interesting. I'm sure that I'm incorrect, but would it in a way be just an acceleration of supply and demand? How is it different from faster supply and demand system?
Well, that's essentially what the goal is to replicate that. So you've hit the nail on the head. Supply and demand ultimately is fundamental of economics, is that we could make more of everything that we currently make if we wanted to. But we could also use more of everything that we make if we wanted to. But we couldn't do all of those things simultaneously because we don't know how to do that. So so at the level that we're at, there would be trade-offs. So if we decided to make more copper, the effort we would have to put towards that would sacrifice other materials, and we would wind up with basically a bunch of copper that we can't use for anything because we can't feed the workers that would be at the copper plant, or we can't power the plant that makes the pipes or whatever. So the society as a whole is a multi-dimensional constant negotiation with itself of what capabilities that we have and what desires that we have. And again, markets are these centralizing forces that try to cut through the noise of all that stuff and find these clean signals to allow people to coordinate their businesses around our common interests and common understanding.
So does the algorithm mainly apply, I'm sorry for using the buzzword, like machine learning, or does it require a lot of inputs from users on an ongoing basis, or a combination of both?
So the interesting thing is that markets are essentially a machine learning algorithm that goes back to the Renaissance. The markets that we use are designed in such a way that they relied on human inputs to work. And one of the reasons that we see markets becoming less stable and less predictable is that we're using machine learning inputs in these marketplaces. And that's causing a lot of pretty bad issues for our actual economies. What a negotiation game does is it provides a better learning algorithm, and it's one that's robust to machine inputs. So you can operate one of these like in a schoolyard or something with just human inputs. But if people come up with machine learning type inputs, or actually want to build new machine learning models, which can take in different sorts of learning modules, if you will, this provides a mathematical platform for designing systems like that. And in particular, if we sort of want to keep having an economy, coming up with markets that are robust to machine inputs is very important, because it's not like we're going to stop having the machines and stop inputting the information from them.
Interesting. I'm curious to know, how did you, was it like, how did you come about with the idea? Was it like something that you researched way before because you were in the commerce space, or just an idea that sparked after learning the negotiation and game theory with no initial intention? I'm just trying to understand how this whole idea came about.
It was a fortunate sequence of inspirations and curiosities and accidents and yeah, there wasn't really a one moment. There was really like 5 or 6, depending on how you count. And even if you want to, just purely think about the time I was spending thinking about just this, then we've got, let's see, one inspiration for generalizing a tracking idea I had, one inspiration for the possibility of recursing the system, and then one inspiration for figuring out that what people really care about isn't what the price is at one instant, but actually the price over time. So three fortuitous inspirations, 2 kind of intuitive, guessy insights that eventually got answered by 2 of those inspirations. So yeah, there was work, but there was a lot of luck happening here.
Awesome, great. And while you were learning and researching this, I'm curious if you have, I'm sure that you have, any principles or guidelines of rule of thumbs that you believe that e-commerce store owners that are operating at the moment in Amazon or have their own store, what can they take from our conversation or from the principles of game theory or the negotiation landscape that you've been researching, like what you said regarding the pricing, that consumers mostly care about price and time. So can you share more of these, like food for thought for the sellers?
So actually, if you are good at this sales and marketing stuff and you've sort of got your head up above water a little bit, one thing that you should probably think about is leveling up the industrial space that you're in and creating marketplaces actually. And this is, it'll be intuitively hard to do this because what marketplaces essentially do is replace salesmen with marketplaces. And so it's a little bit like, okay, you're the fastest man in the world. Let's convince everybody that they should just walk around in mobility chairs from now on. Like it's a little counterintuitive, but the kinds of abilities and connections that you have to bring on people is critical to sort of getting marketplaces going. And there's a concept in evolution and in game theory called the Red Queen's race. It's based on Alice Through the Looking Glass, where in sort of opposite world, you have to run as fast as you can to stay still. In a sort of pure marketing environment, as you level up your marketing, you're sort of instructing everybody else how to level up their marketing.
Exactly. And
so everyone's sort of spending more and more effort on just trying to get sales. And ultimately that is undermining economic performance because production and transport and design and use and so on are all very valuable. And so the companies can and have and do eat those valuable qualities just so that they can get the sales that they need to stay afloat. And so by taking, marketing and sales leadership and founding new marketplaces, what you do is, yes, you are elevating the companies that are doing the R&D and the production quality, but that raises the level of your entire industry and changes what's being focused on in terms of what's competing to that. And by being the person operating the marketplace, instead of getting sort of the commissions on your sales, what you're now getting is the commissions on your entire industry, which is now improving itself because they are not having to spend so much time and money on replicating sales forces across dozens or hundreds or in some cases thousands of companies.
It's very interesting because like in the marketing games, it's always, there's a saying that the person who has the most money to spend on acquiring the customer will win. And it's basically a race to the bottom because, as you said, everybody is just, it's an arms race. Everybody is using marketing. Some are doing it very manipulatively and the others are following. Either they're copying the good practice or the bad practice, whatever. But if the whole differentiator, the only differentiator is marketing, so it's in a way, it's a race to the bottom. And I see a lot of value in your advice of just building the platform. But would you say that it's enough to build tools to help the merchants, or you need to build a marketplace, a platform? And do you see a distinction between providing, they say that in the gold rush, the people that made money were the people selling access, shuffles and shuffles.
Right.
But this is just providing a tool, not necessarily a platform. So is there a distinction?
So there definitely is. As one of the things that sort of makes a marketplace work is actually the strategic restriction that the users are under. So trust, a big piece of trust is down to what you sort of know the other person can't do. If everyone in a deal is armed and a known killer and willing to murder at a moment's notice, then the way that you can do that deal is very different than if everybody's been friends since they were kids and there's no strangers and everybody's just happy to be there. And so in cooperative games, one of the weird things is that having strategies that you can't follow can actually benefit you, because other people, knowing that there's things that you can't do, can then do things that they don't have to defend themselves from those things anymore. And that can lead to much higher levels of cooperation. So just having the tools, which is like, I've done that. This code is open source overseas. These tools are available and they're out there for people that want to pick them up. That's insufficient because, you can't unilaterally disarm, if you will, in an arms race. That's just like, oh, well, I'm not part of the conversation anymore. But if you're sort of in that leading position and you can see the writing on the wall and realize that, you can't just build nukes forever. Like eventually you got to do something that actually matters. That by taking these tools and building that platform and using those relationships to bring people into a market where they're behaving in fundamentally new ways that are benefiting the industry, and then gaining the benefits of the industry for themselves. And those benefits are greater than the benefits that they would have earned by going out on their own. And once you get to that point where you get enough people together that joining is better than staying outside, that's where you get the market. And that's when suddenly you can start taking advantage of competition among your customers, competition among your suppliers, and creating an entire ecosystem around that kind of marketplace.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take like the devil's, not necessarily devil's advocate, but it's pretty clear that building a marketplace is very valuable and building a platform is valuable, but it's very challenging as well. So, and I'm sure that you thought about this a lot. So I'm curious to know what are the steps, because like I tried to build a marketplace in the past, and then you need to balance between the supply and demand. And you need to think about, there are many different variables into this equation. And I'm sure that you gave much more thought about this than I did. So I'm curious to know, how would you go about with the first steps of building a marketplace, and what makes a marketplace valuable in your opinion, or based on your observation and research? That is a very generous question,
Right. So let me sort of take that backwards then. So what makes marketplaces valuable? Because that gives you sort of the hints to what you need to do to get there. what makes the marketplace valuable is that once it's in operation, not participating in the market is economically suicidal. Because the market can do better price negotiation than an average player, or in many cases, even the best player can do on their own in securing counterparties to actually trade with, then if you attempt to sort of go out on your own, you have to generate these relationships that already pre-exist within the market space on your own. And that can be so expensive that it causes your business to fail. And the same thing applies from the customer end, that once a marketplace is established, then attempting to come up with your own supply chain outside the marketplace, again, is potentially suicidal, or in some cases actually suicidal if it's food that you're attempting to acquire, because forming those relationships and getting reliable counterparties could be sort of too difficult. So that's the value proposition of like a functioning marketplace, is that it has that relationship network and that network effect of relationships, so that all new relationships start with the marketplace. And then effectively you get every important business relationship for free just by entering the marketplace, which is somewhere between free and extremely inexpensive. And so because that's the value proposition, that's exactly what the problem is. The problem is, how do you build up and promulgate a valuable core set of relationships that can serve as the nucleus for how to build out the marketplace in general. So for my system, for the negotiations to sort of stabilize mathematically, assuming that people are fundamentally incapable of learning and fundamentally incapable of agreeing with each other, which isn't true, but you want to sort of worst case model things. 50-ish participants, 49, 51 is like about where the stability numbers start looking very good compared to existing high stability marketplaces. So at the initial level, you need to have solid relationships with a couple dozen plus a handful of suppliers and customers to be involved with that sort of thing. Then you have to actually get them set up and rolling through a marketplace price discovery mechanism. One of the advantages of my price discovery mechanism for a starting up market is that the rewards and costs scale to the marketplace size. So the initial people inside the marketplace have very, very low cost of negotiation because the marketplace is very small and they're negotiating about times in the future. So if the marketplace grows between when they're doing their negotiation and when the negotiations are actually being acted upon, the rewards will grow with the marketplace. And so there's an incentive for individuals in the market to grow out the market in order to increase the value of their own participation in the marketplace. And that's the sort of thing you're looking for, essentially, is individuals within the marketplace need to personally benefit by being there, and they need to personally benefit by new people coming in. And if you can get a seed that's large enough to support those two conditions, then the system can grow on its own. And if you can't, if you're too small, or if your design doesn't benefit people that are in or benefit people for bringing people in, then it's going to die on the vine. And it's very easy to fall at any one of those three issues.
Interesting. From a feature standpoint, or maybe value standpoint, what do you consider I mean, can you maybe like rate the importance of different features in a marketplace? So let's say transparency, trust elements, a good review system. You mentioned the punishment and reward. So I'm assuming that everything in life is kind of based on punishment and rewards to an extent. But what do you consider, like based on your research and how you built your marketplace, what do you consider like very important? Is transparency important? Is a good review system important? The pricing the most important feature? Do you understand the question?
Yeah, I think I do. So I'd say the most important thing for marketplace is predictability. And that's where price and commoditization come in. But that's also where regulation and transparency come in. So predictability, if your marketplace is selling something that's just sort of random, so like you've got a marketplace for books and you don't have titles, you're just like, I want to buy 5 books. Okay, 5 books show up. Which 5 books? You know, maybe it's the Pentateuch, maybe it's a Dr. Seuss and a book on quantum physics, and you know, and Stephen King's latest thriller, and you know, one of those cardboard books that like 3-year-olds can chew on, and Harry Potter. Like probably those weren't the 5 books you were looking for. So in that case, the predictability needs to get a little bit more specific. You know, you're looking for specific titles of books. If you're in a more commercial kind of space where you're selling, you know, apples or flashlights or something like that, you might need quality standards that allow people to understand what they're looking at and what they're looking for. And once you've gotten past quality issues, then price becomes the determinator. So if I can buy a sack of potatoes from you, and I can also buy a sack of potatoes from Jim, and sacks of potatoes are just sacks of potatoes, they're going to be the same weight, they're going to basically taste like potatoes, you know, and so on. Then Jim's selling me the sack for $5 and you're selling me the sack for $9. Guess who's getting my business? But if Jim's sack, you know, has flies buzzing out of it and half the potatoes are rotten, then I'm not coming back to this marketplace, right? Like this isn't what I signed up for. So coming up with these sort of quality standards in order to create that transparency and that trust for the customer base is all part of expectation. And then in terms of rewards and punishments, that's one of the things you need to do. If Jim's not holding up quality standards for the industry, then Jim has to get, you know, pushed out of the industry, because we sell what we sell here, and what we sell is, you know, stuff that works and meets whatever the standards are. And so a lot of these kinds of things you're talking about, like, is transparency or punishment or reward, is that more important? What's important is quality. And the engineering term quality is just meets expectations. And so figuring out how to set expectations in a way that they can be consistently met across your entire industry, so that people can start competing on quality and delivery instead of competing on sales and marketing, is what allows a marketplace to transform an industry.
Interesting. And you mentioned the word commodity, or commoditizing the products. Isn't this counterproductive for a marketplace, or for creating a win-win situation? I'm just asking, I'm not sure. But my initial thought was commoditizing product isn't necessarily good. I don't know. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, that gets into the psychology of sales and marketing, because in sales and marketing, what you'd like to do is have a monopoly over a specific product category, and then people have to come to you, right? But, you know, we live in a world where trivial, you know, replication is just the technology that we have access to. So commoditization is something that can pick up very easily. And what commoditized industries lose in margin doesn't necessarily have to be less than the cost reduction of their marketing budgets. So if you're in a business that's spending 30% of your revenue on sales and marketing, and you can switch that business to a commodity where you spend 2% of your revenue on sales and marketing. If your revenue only drops by 20%, you're way ahead of that game. You're a lot better off than you used to be. And while this might sound like, crosses and garlic to the sales and marketing team, because wait, 90% reduction, what's going on? By creating these marketplaces, instead of just getting the commissions from your sales at your business, you can now stripe across businesses. So if you're in a field where there's dozens or hundreds of competing businesses, and each one of their budgets is dropping by 90%, but you're now serving 100 times as many businesses, your revenues actually go up by a factor of 10. And those guys that didn't create the marketplace, they have to go find a job somewhere, but you can actually be better off. So while it's not possible for sort of a all the way around the board, everybody's better off type of win out of a situation like this, it is possible for the users that join in to all benefit from losing the costs of the people that don't come along for the ride. And another thing about commoditization is that it isn't even necessary to commoditize your own industry. Another potential strategy is something called commoditizing your complements. And this is sort of what made Bill Gates insanely wealthy. Microsoft had the contract with IBM to write the operating system for their personal computer. And they didn't care about their personal computer division. So they basically asked him how to do the marketing for the personal computer. And what he said was, make a commodity, open up all the protocols, make it so everybody can sell. They can't put the badge on it, but they can sell exactly the same hardware, exactly the same configuration. Well, with the personal computer being a commodity, then because he's selling operating systems, he's got the retail part of a vast industry. So if you're in an industry and you have other complementary products, look into commoditizing those products. And again, if it's doable, it will be beneficial for the customers of those products. It'll be beneficial for the businesses operating those products, because they'll lose some of their salespeople and be able to save that money. But if those complementary products are now commoditized for you, your customers will now have more money to spend on your product or whatever's pairing up with that system that you're selling. So there's an opportunity to commoditize your own industry if you're sort of leading and have something to go. But there's also opportunities if you're looking for new strategic marketing opportunities to commoditize ancillary industries. And that can also happen back the supply chain as well. So if your company is buying stuff, it might be worthwhile as part of your supply chain management to commoditize the supplier industries, just to simplify your own supply chain, because now you sort of have a self-building supply chain, robustizer happening. So there's several different kinds of ways that you might be able to deploy marketplaces either to transform your own business, to transform, strategically useful businesses, or to transform, client businesses that are any one of which could turn out to be real game changers.
Mm-hmm. This is very interesting, and it's also practical, and I really appreciate it. Either I've been trying to learn game theory, going on and off, reading a bit of the most fundamental stuff, but I'm curious to know if there is any books or resources that you suggest for, let's say there's an e-commerce store owner that is listening to our podcast, and what we're talking about piques his curiosity, but he doesn't want to build a marketplace. He just wants to improve his own e-commerce store, his own profits and gains, which is very likely. So are there any resources that come to mind that you say, okay, these 3 books are like a must?
The Rand Corporation, here, just give me a second. I have to go over, I can't remember names very well, so I have to go to my bookshelf.
Sure.
So I know you said you don't do video, but this book right here
Mm-hmm.
is called The Complete Strategist, and it's spelled very weirdly. It's COMPLEAT TRATEGYST. So it's strategy ST, and complete is a weird spelling too, but it's by a guy named J.D. Williams, and it's called the Rand series. And it introduces the basics of 2 strategy games. It has amusing little 50s style art in it, and it's a terrific resource.
Interesting. Okay, thank you so much, Noah. It's been a lot of pleasure, a lot of food for thought. Reinforces a lot of things that I've been thinking about lately. Is there anything that you would like to mention that we didn't discuss during the conversation?
Well, so just how to reach out to me, if that's okay.
For sure. No, this was the next step, but I was wondering if you have before this. But
before that, no, I think we covered some good gems for e-commerce, and I think we did a good job here.
Awesome, great. Okay, so where can people? Obviously, we'll share the links to your website and LinkedIn in your show notes. But do you mind sharing where can people find you and reach out to you and connect?
Yeah, well, those are great places. Please do connect to me on LinkedIn if you have any interests. Also, you can reach me directly at my email, noahphealy@yahoo.com. And that's basically it.
Awesome, great. Thank you so much, Noah. Have a lovely rest of your day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Hi guys, this is Yaron again. Just a few more things before you take off. Number 1, if you want to learn more about e-commerce and marketing, make sure you check out our YouTube channel, which is called Ecom X Factor Official. Number 2, check out our Facebook group, which is called Ecom X Factor Marketing and E-commerce Mastermind. This is a great place to ask questions and connect with other business owners. And last but not least, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to share it with your friends and colleagues, plus leave a review at your favorite podcast app.